Could you tell us about your own personal experience with farming in McCormick County?
Well, my farm at this time is a tree farm. I grow pine, loblolly pine trees. My father, when we married, gave us a little 10-acre tract to build our house on, and then since I've accumulated additional tracts in the farm. Now is 575 acres of tree farm. But for the first 35 years, I had beef cows on the front, but I discontinued that in '99, and it's all tree farms now.
I came here probably about 2005, 4 or 5, and I started in Florida because that's where my house is and my work is. I wanted a tree farm that was in a national forest, that wasn't near a nuclear power plant, that was on a river, that was where the environment and the air and the rain are typical. So when you study the weather patterns of the weather surface, this area of South Carolina, there's certain weather patterns that move so that you don't get that many droughts or floods or snow. So in my traveling from Titusville, Florida, through Ocala, to Georgia, and up to South Carolina, I saw this for sale sign here on 81, and I stopped in and I fell in love with the land, and it meets all this criteria I have of where I want a tree farm.
And that is good because we're from Ohio originally. My family friends are all up in Ohio, but through a series of visits to North Carolina, to Hickory over the years, I just decided I do not want to spend the rest of my life in cold, snowy
Yes, sir.
Ohio. This is a lot better than Ohio. And so, surprisingly enough, my wife was on board with me immediately that if we want to move. So we moved down here 24 years ago and have never looked back. And we lived in an agriculture area in Ohio. Northwest Ohio was heavy on agriculture. It was all around me, but I did not come from an agricultural background, no.
Okay.
But I did a lot of work for farmers, so we
Yes, sir.
talked the talk a lot, so probably half my work came from farmers. In addition to doing that, I ran a habitat, being in construction, so it's called Habitat for Humanity.
Okay,
We
no, I've never
we
heard
built, you build small houses for people. If you can get people who are qualified
Yes,
and they're
sir.
having a hard time of it, we would build houses for them. We would build one a year in the McCormick area.
Oh.
And we had about 8 lots that we were building on, so after about 8 years, we ran out of lots.
Yes, sir.
One of the fellows that worked for me did a lot of volunteer work over here, and he said, let's take the crew over here, and we went out to the wilderness area.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
now
sir.
okay.
Yes.
But anyhow, that was in a really bad state of disrepair. So we were there for 3 or 4 years, and I came here and worked on my own just for stuff to do. I'm retired, and I like keeping myself busy, so I would come in here and volunteer work.
Yes, sir.
But eventually I was here so often that the existing president at that time, just came up to me and said, we'd like to put you on the payroll.
I've been in McCormick roughly all of my life except for my military experience and my time away from Carolina to do other stuff like business ventures. So coming up in my high school years, my father
Yes,
was
sir.
a farmer, local farmer. He grew like vegetables and fruits to give away to the neighbors.
Oh, okay.
And in the process of him growing the fruit, he would like give them away. And we like were helping with the chores, like the planting and the gathering and the washing and the sort of stuff. Roughly about an acre to an acre and a half.
Oh, okay.
Like rotating crops. You had like a summer garden, then you would rotate it in the winter to winter garden.
So he didn't gain any profits from this. He donated it all to.
Basically, it was a giveaway. It was kind of like a farm to table kind of thing, and it was his way of blessing people in the less fortunate people in the community.
Oh, that's really nice.
Like we feed the homeless in Anderson, South Carolina,
Oh, okay.
and one of my brothers lived in Abbeville, so he would gather the tomatoes, he would gather the corn, he would gather that stuff to make a big pot of vegetable soup, and he would take it and make cornbread and give it away to the homeless up in Anderson, South Carolina.
My name is Hugh Cook Brown Jr.
Alright.
And my father was Hugh Cook Brown Sr. And he grew up in McCormick, and he was a long-time resident of that age. 500 acres in Mount Carmel, right up the road. And he raised some cotton,
Yes, sir.
pigs, cattle, and he had several families to help him do that. And they kind of raised everything they needed on that farm.
Yes, sir.
And his farm was on 823 as you go from Mount Carmel to Abbeville. And it was a big deal for that period of time. And then back in the 20s, McCormick was a booming place. They had like 3 or 4 banks.
Yes, sir.
The train would come through every day, pick up the cotton. Cotton was the big crop. And then in the 30s, when the Depression hit and cotton prices went down, it just kind of killed McCormick. A lot of banks closed and people quit growing cotton. So that's where she grew up. Now my father, he had about 80 head of cows, which he was in the insurance business. He had an insurance agency in McCormick, but he liked to raise cattle. So he had about 80 head of cattle, beef cattle, on Barksdale Ferry Road in McCormick, which he raised just as a hobby.
Yes, sir.
And then when I was growing up, I helped him a little bit, toting hay and moving cattle around. I wasn't much help, but I did help him a little bit.
So what did you guys do with the cattle?
Well, they were for beef cattle, and he would send them to market occasionally.
So, would you guys grow anything else, like any crops, or was it
No.
just cattle?
No. Now I think they would plant hay to feed the cows,
Yes, sir.
but no cash crops.
And do you remember what kind of cattle you guys had? Like what?
They were, I think Herefords, the brown and white ones.
Yes, sir.
You call those Herefords?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think that's what they were.
Do you have any other things, like did you grow your own vegetables? Did you have your own little garden?
Well, we grew up in the city.
Yes, sir.
So I was a city boy. I
understand.
didn't like, that was hard work.
Right.
Loading hay when it was 100 degrees in the summertime.
Right.
That was too hard for me. But my brother and I grew up in McCormick. And we would help him a little bit, but it was hard work.
Yes, sir. Well,
Could you tell us about the major changes you've witnessed with farming in McCormick in your lifetime?
My father had one mule, and he worked all the row crops with a mule, and we had no tractors, mowers, that sort of thing, no combines. We grew a little grain, but my father cut the grain by hand with which was called a hand cradle that goes way back to hundreds of years. It hadn't changed, but it was just totally different. And then as time went along, my father was not able to make a living on a farm of that type, and he had to go to a textile mill in Greenwood and commute every day. And the farming went to tractors, combines, mowers, that sort of thing, for raising row crops.
My grandfather on my mother's side owned this place at one time, and he had row crops, and that was a traditional land use at that time back in the 50s. And my daddy purchased this farm in 1953, and he gradually transformed it into a small beef cattle farm. And he started out with horned Hereford cattle, and over time we've gone through a lot of breeds, and now I have mostly Angus. But my father loved this place. He liked horses, and that was our recreation. We rode horses together, and we hunted and we fished. But we never lived over here. I always lived in the little town of Parksville, and I always dreamed about living here. And when I got ready to get married, I brought my girlfriend to this spot and asked her if she would live here. And fortunately, she said yes. But as far as the farm and what we've done, we've changed over the years. You know, we've tried to progress and make changes to adapt new technology and new methods of farming. When my daddy first started out, pretty much the whole place was just kind of wide open and the cows roamed. And over time we put in cross fences, and back in the late 80s I went to Missouri grazing school and learned about management intensive grazing. And we already had the place cross fenced to some degree, but I started using polywire and putting in smaller paddocks and stripping it. And the beauty of the polywire electric fences, they're portable. You can change them around. You can string them up in 15 minutes, so you can move your pastures around. Instead of letting the cows just free roam, you try to manage what they're grazing. You try to give the forages a rest period of at least 6 weeks so that the grass can recover and develop a deep root system. Horses are notorious spot grazers. They'll pick out what they like and eat it into the ground. There'll be grass that tall by it and they won't touch it. Well, cows are not quite as bad, but they're spot grazers too. They go out and they pick what they like, just like you. If you weren't concerned about diet and all of that, what would you eat? Whatever it is, it would be what you like if you had a choice. Well, the animals are the same way. That has a downside in that they keep those plants, the desirable plants, eat down close to the ground and eventually kill them out. And they leave the stuff they don't like. So we use the management intensive grazing. We got some cost share money through Natural Resources Conservation Service and put in a well and water lines and water us so the animals would have water all over the farm. We put down fabric and gravel in high use areas like around the water troughs and in the cattle corral to keep it from being muddy. And that helps not only with working with the animals, not wading in the mud all the time, but it helps prevent erosion and runoff and sedimentation in the stream, so it's a good water quality practice as well. I haven't always, farm full time, which I farm here now, and I farm in Anderson County with my son, and I manage some land for some other people, so that pretty much keeps me totally occupied. But I had a full-time job as an agricultural extension agent with Clemson University, and that's how I met Miss Georgia's daddy through my extension work. And I spent 32 years doing that, and I loved it. I loved helping people, working with people, and loved being outside, working with nature, and it was a good fit for me. And I found out when I was a child and a teenager, that's what I wanted to do. My father was good friends with the local county agent, and the county agent's office was open on Saturday morning. At least the county agent was there, and we'd go up there a lot of times on Saturday mornings and ride around with him, and got to know him, got to know what he did, and I kind of just fell in love with that profession.
So solar is being applied to agriculture. Okay, so you can power your milk machines, you can power the farm equipment, you can heat your buildings, you can use it in growing things. So.
If you will, tell me about the history of the John De La Howe campus and its role in agriculture.
Right. Well, John De La Howe was a French physician. He had fought in the 7 Years' War before he left France. He came to Charleston around 1760, I believe, 1759 or 60, and he set up practice for medical practice. And he began to visit this section. He liked it, and so he began to accumulate holdings of land. And over a period of time, he accumulated, I believe, around 3,000 acres. It was a working farm. He had tenants, that sort of thing, and they grew cotton, corn, the various crops. And De La Howe had taken part in the American Revolutionary War. He treated soldiers, wounded soldiers on both sides, and consequently, in treating British soldiers, he got in trouble, and it took him a while to get out of that. Some of them accused him of being a Tory, which he was not. And then he read an article in a magazine about a school where the children worked, and a working agricultural school, and in his will he left instructions so that this De La Howe school would be patterned after that article. And it was it took a good many years from 1797 to about 1831, I believe, before it actually received any students. And to begin with, they received 24 children, 12 boys, 12 girls from Abbeville County only. This was Abbeville County, by the way, at that time. Then that it ran like that for a lot of years, and then finally in 1918, it was extended to students in any part of South Carolina.
Well, I think it's pretty cool. I stopped here about 10 years ago because, like I said, I came here in 05 or 04 or 05, and I saw it, and I stopped, and it was, and I saw a brochure on it, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. Now that they've revamped it to the agriculture school and modernized it and expand their operations, I think it's even better. I'm really impressed with this school.
You know, I've been able to do so much stuff here.
It's met your
In
expectations.
comparison, oh yeah, in comparison to my other school, like I've gotten so many more opportunities, and especially in this class, I've gotten to learn so much.
I think I came here like 8 years ago. There was a different direction and a different focus here,
Yes, sir.
if there was a focus at all. And so as it all collapsed and they wanted to recalculate what they were going to do here,
Yes, sir.
when they went with the idea of this school, which was a wonderful idea, but it was just a total change of direction. It was going to take a lot of money.
Yeah,
One was talk of let's lock the gates and shut it down.
yeah,
And that was, look at all this stuff around here, you know. I said, you gotta be kidding, surely there's gonna be a use for it. So when they came up with this, I stuck around just to watch it happen. I like doing what I'm doing, of course, too, but I stuck around just to watch it happen, and I am just delighted. I mean, I truly am.
yeah.
So
I really think.
everything will just get better over time. And
Yes,
it's
sir.
pretty
Oh,
good
I
now,
agree.
but it's just gonna continue to get better, and I just think this is a wonderful, wonderful use of this grand facility, as opposed to locking the gates, you know.